Furious Driving, proud to be supported by Diamond Bright, protecting, cleaning and caring for the Furious fleet and for yours with 10% off using code FD10. Bidding Classics, the online classic car marketplace with more cars added every week. And Lancaster Insurance cover the Furious fleet. They are one of the biggest specialist insurers in the UK, covering all areas of vintage to modern classic cars and motorbikes. Follow the links in the description below. Welcome to Furious Driving. This is a slightly different video brought about by the fact that it has occurred that I've got slightly too many cars and one or two of them have got to go because I just don't have space for everything. I've got other projects I would like to bring onto the channel and haven't got room for them physically, and also I'm paying far too much in road tax because too many of my cars are not tax exempt under 40-year-old cars, so I do need to make a change or two somewhere. And I was thinking about how or what I'm going to do, and sort of ironically the two that are most likely for the chop are over there. The Rover 75, simply because it came in as part of the Trading Up series of films, which has suddenly come to a grinding halt because I kind of like it. That will be the biggest turn of profit on any of the Trading Up cars at all, so that one potentially has to go. Alternatively, the Volvo we hadn't driven since November, so and the fact it's 21 miles per gallon and needs to be taxed, and it's quite slow. And I like hot hatches, so but I do love the 1980s styling of it, so something's got to give. I'll ask the question at the end of the video, but it did make me think about what are all these things worth? I've been accumulating these cars for a long time. In fact, most of them have only cost me a couple of £100, if that, but they do seem to be quite nice cars now. So in the style of Vin Wiki, where they look at someone like Stradman and his Lamborghini, or Hoovy and his Mercedes and his Lamborghini and Ferraris, they take that YouTube channel apart and say, well, what's this channel actually worth in terms of the metal? And I thought, well, do you know, I had no idea what my whole bunch of cars is worth. They're all on one big policy with Lancaster, but each car is insured separately, and I've never really put all the numbers together. And a lot of the numbers I've been using to insure them, I've realised in the last few months, are quite a bit out of date, because I've been watching eBay and Facebook auctions and all kinds of other stuff, and realising that I've really quite undervalued some of these cars. This one, for example, the Mini, I paid £500 for this car, and Y-Regs are now going for quite a lot more than £500, as an example. So I thought I'd put this all into chronological order and talk you through all the cars in the fleet, because there's about 14 of them or so at the moment, and give you an idea of what the entire fleet is actually worth, because frankly, it's a little bit scary. The only car I'm not including on this list is this one stood to my right, the C250 AMG Premium Plus 4MATIC yada yada yada, because I don't fully own this car. This is partly on a loan, so I'm not considering it part of my owned assets. It's not that I'm leasing it, it's a car that I will own when I've finished paying for it, but by that point it'll probably be worth absolutely nothing with another 100,000 miles on it. So I'm just excluding it for the time being from this list, otherwise it would make a mockery of the entire thing, probably. Everything else is bought for cash, and frankly, not very much cash. Speaking of buying things for cash, mugs are available in the shop, furiousdriving.co.uk, as are hats, and that kind of thing does help keep this channel afloat. So do head over to the shop and take a look at the fun and exciting and interesting stuff over there. Right, shall we start chronologically with the oldest car to the newest car? It's somewhere to start, isn't it? Let's get cracking. Now, I do kind of feel like I need to stop and just say I'm not making this video in order to try and appear showy or boastful about look what I've got, because I'm not. This whole collection of cars, this empire of dirt, has one common defining denominator about when I bought them and how I bought them, and that is because I got these cars because I like them, not because I thought they're going to be worth money. And for the most part, they cost, well, under £1,000, in many cases under 500 quid. So the fact that some of them have become valuable is really just a reflection on the car market in general. A rising tide lifts all boats and all that, and the fact that a lot of them are now quite a lot older than when I bought them, and so that's been a benefit, and many of them are incredibly rare and people have just suddenly started to care. This isn't me saying, oh, look at what I've got. This is just an interesting reflection on the fact that I've accumulated a lot of cars, and I'm just genuinely curious as to what this whole lot is actually worth. Because when it comes to cars, I don't think about money, because I'm genuinely more excited about a rare everyday car, which is a survivor, than I am about a supercar. The Crown Victoria is a perfect case in point. It's not massively rare yet, but it's a car that was built to survive 500,000 miles, but be sold to fleets for a mega tight budget. And I really kind of enjoy and admire that kind of engineering, as opposed to supercar, big money kind of stuff. So yeah, that's where this video is coming from, not to try and be, look at me, you Mr. Show Off. just to make that very clear at the outset. So starting all the way back in the 1960s with the Morris Mini 1000 automatic, which is, I was going to say the newest member of the fleet, because it's the newest permanent member of the fleet, when it arrived just before Christmas last year. Didn't pay a lot for that car, but the proviso with that was it was going to be fixed and not just, just broken for parts, if at all possible. And in its current position, I'm going to give it a value of about £1,000 because I've taken it apart, shown it's a relatively good shell, but there's a long way to go. It needs thousands more spending on it. When it's done, it's potentially worth £20,000 or more, but it's going to have a lot of money spent on it to get to that point. I've actually seen projects going on eBay in similar and worse condition for £2,000 or £3,000, but I'm not going to be unrealistic because it is literally currently just a shell and a pile of boxes at the minute. So call it £1,000 because, let's try and be realistic. In other cases, I've tried to give it a best day scenario because if it's a running car, I would sell it with a good MOT on it. I would have serviced it, I'd have made sure there's nothing hanging off it, so it's not as ropey as potentially it could be. It's quite a curiosity because it's a Morris rather than an Austin. It's a Mark II, which is like the rarest of years because they didn't make them for very long. It's an automatic, which is my most hated of all things, but in the current market, automatics are kind of worth a little bit more because a lot of people seem to be quite liking it, and I genuinely don't know why, especially in fun cars. It also does future-proof it with people who are not learning to drive manuals because they're learning to drive in electric cars. That does give it a future market of a sort. So, I don't know, anyway, that is an interesting little car, and that's kind of where it sits at the minute in its big pile of boxes, and I could probably sell it for more in parts, but that's not where that car is going. Next up, chronologically, the Rover 2000. This is another car I paid 500 quid for, but that was about 30 years ago, 1992 I think I bought that car. So it's been part of my life for a very, very long time. It's almost familiarity breeds contempt in a way because I keep ignoring it because it is so comfortably mine, even if it doesn't run every single day. However, P6s really have been undervalued for an enormously long time, but they've started to creep up and become a bit closer to what they are genuinely worth. Now that car is a nice solid car. It's not immaculate, but it's got a beautiful interior, which for a while after it was done, the interior was worth more than the car as a whole because it was a retrimmed P6 interior in Toledo red, which is stunning. And it's also a Series 1.5, which means it sits in between the Series 1 cars with the flat bonnet and the flat pleat and static seat belts, and the Series 2 cars with the fluted bonnet and the box pleat and inertia reel seat belts. So it's got flat pleat seats with inertia reel seat belts, which is quite unusual in the strip speedo. So it's a quite unusual car again. It's a solid car. It's been well looked after. The engine's been rebuilt, it's been retrimmed, it could do with a repaint, but I'm going to call that on £6,000. And this is based on what other stuff is going on Car and Classic and on eBay and that kind of thing, checking the market for other P6s that are selling at the moment. Those have had a slow but steady rise up in value, and now they're enormously worth more than they were a couple of years ago when you can pick up a good 2,000 for £1,000 or £2,000. Now they've risen up quite a lot, and £1,000 or £2,000 only gets you a bit of a barn find project. Sticking in the P6 vibe, 1973 Rover P6 V8, although this is no longer a standard car, which makes it a little bit harder to put a price on. Looking through the Car and Classic classifieds at the moment, there are some very, very nice 3.5 litres standard cars, like immaculate ones, between £20,000 and £30,000. Now this makes it appear to be a very valuable car, but it's modified now with the 4.6 litre in it. It is painted though in a non-standard colour. It's not rusty, which is good. Good interior, good newly built engine. Now I'm struggling to find a value for this, so I'm going to call it £10,000, but I think maybe it could be £15,000, but I don't really know. So let's call it 10 grand and leave it there for the time being. That's a car I'm not planning on selling anytime soon, but it is going to need a fair bit more work to make it the car I really want it to be in terms of suspension, transmission, back axle, brakes, all those other things to bring the rest of the cars running up to the engine's performance potentials. But yeah, I don't know, I'll call it 10 grand, but so mint manual cars going for 20 to 30, maybe I'm undervaluing it a bit. Now moving slightly further forward on, another decade, 1983 Mercedes 230e in the garage over there where the Rover normally lives. In fact, I thought it was going to be a real handy thing having the car in the garage while the Rover was off at the garage being worked on. I'm not going to tell you about that one at the minute, that's in another video coming up soon. It turns out it's so big I can't even walk around it, never mind work on it in there, so that's been counterproductive. Anyway, these things are a hard one to put a value on because really good ones go for a lot of money. There is an absolutely mint 4-door 230e in petrol blue metallic in a dealer in London right now for £16,500. There are very rotten ones for about £1,000, and there are one or two that I've seen that are slightly better than that. Basically, with the wing welded back on, you're basically where I'm looking at, for £3,000. Now, the brakes don't work, the engine does, and it still needs a wing put back on, so I'm going to call this one about £2,000, which for a car that was free isn't a bad return on investment. It was a lot of hours to get it there though. So yeah, that's a car with a lot of potential to rise up in the future when I've finished doing the work on it. But yeah, currently that's a £2,000 car, I think, give or take. Mid-80s, Sinclair C5. Now I know I've let that project absolutely sink because it was just proving incredibly difficult to make an electric motor sit in air and connect up to an axle it didn't want to be connected to. I'm going to come back to that, I think, over the summertime, because I would like to be hooning around in that thing. I need to take a completely different tack on it because the way I'm working on it right now is never going to work. But I will figure something out on that. Current condition, 50 quid. Not a big one. Next up, the 1980s continue to call the Volvo 740 from 1988. The 740 GL, 5-speed manual, blue interior, one owner from new before me. Interesting history. It's not mint, but it's not bad either. There's a few little sort of scrapes around the car in terms of tiny door dings, chips on the edge of the door, which I'm going to sort out actually because that does need to be smartened up. Overall, very, very nice car, and we've proved it's reliable. We drove it to Sweden and back last week, so it's a good car. Now, values on this thing, again, they've risen enormously in the time I've had this. If it was an estate, it would have risen even further, because estates of these are currently going for between £4,000 and £5,000. Saloons, though, aren't. I think this is worth about £2,000 in its current situation like this, which is a fair chunk of money, but for the amount of car you get, if you're buying by the foot, that's incredibly good value. So yeah, one owner from new, original dealer plates, original dealer stickers, accessories like the plastic rubber floor mats in there, and the original Volvo mud flaps. It's amazing, it's a slice of history. Huge car for not huge money, £2,000. Next up, the Rover 220 Coupe, the Tomcat, which is a real channel favourite, and one of my favourites as well. However, it does need work. The paint on it is horrible in many places. It does, however, have good suspension. It's been lowered, it's got good brakes, got EBC all round, it's got new tyres, it's got upgraded alloys to the Rover BRM Cosmos wheels on it, it's got a nice interior. It does need the oil seals working, but I'm going to treat this value as if the head gasket and top gasket had been done and it's not dropping oil everywhere. Oh, it's got Piper stainless exhaust on it as well. Now, these again have risen up enormously in value. I think I paid £200 or £100 for that car because it was a project. Scrappage scheme survivor. Really nice ones are currently going for £5,000, even more in some cases. If it's an FDH, £10,000. They are the Japanese re-import ones. As it needs paint, I'm going to call it £2,000, but I might be underselling it. Again, I think I'm probably being too harsh on it. It might be a £2,500 car, but I'm going to call it £2,000 for the purposes of this particular thing because it needs a £2,000 paint job to make it into a £4,000 car. That's the problem with paint. It's expensive. It brings the value of the car up a lot, but if it's a low value car, it only brings it up as much as the cost of the job. So if I was selling it, I might be considering doing that, but then what's the point? Because you make nothing on it. Anyway, that's where that car sits. Next up, we've got another 2-litre T-Series powered Rover R8. This one's the 420 GSI Tourer from 1995. This is another great running car, nice and solid as before, nice interior. Not sure about the history on this one, not so much history, but even worse paint than the Coupe. In this one, the only good panel with lacquer on it that hasn't fallen off is the one that was repaired at some point in the 1990s. Everything else is just gone. So, again, I gave a good price for this car on the proviso it was going to be improved, fixed, made better, and I've done a few things. I've changed the timing belt on it, I've welded a little bit on the back of it. It's a nice car, it needs some new tyres on it to be fair, but it is a very rare car. Obviously it needs paint, which devalues it very badly indeed. However, it's an incredibly rare and weirdly desirable car. There's only about 15 or 20 of them on the road, which makes it quite a hard thing to put a price on. But based on the price of other ones that have sold recently, I'm going to call that one about £1,500. If it was painted, I think it'd be a £2,500 to £3,000 car. Without paint, that's where we sit. So yeah, that is where Rovers are sadly. Rover R8's brilliant cars, tragically undervalued. Next up, from 1996, only a year further down the line, Another Rover. This time it's the next shape, the R3. This is the 200 VI, which is one of my favourite little hot hatches. It's so much fun to drive, and even though the previous owner would love to have it back, I would love to keep on driving it, so we can't have it back at the moment. Anyway, I was valuing it about £3,000 because just sheer rarity. It's another car with about 15 left on the road, 15 to 20 again. Desirable if you know what it is, but it's so unknown, it's sort of not desirable in that respect. I've put a value of about £3,000 on it, but the last one to sell went for 2.5, so I'm going to call it 2.5 just based on that previous sale, which again, absolutely nothing for such a cool car, especially when you line it up against the next car, which is the 2000 Alfa 145 Cloverleaf, which is not quite as rare, but still very rare. About 70 or so of these left on the UK roads last time I checked. Practical Classics, I think, said there were 56 of them, which is even rarer. And that's a very, very comparable car. 1.8 versus 2 litre, 3-door hot hatch from the 90s. Both got virtually the same power output, same 0 to 60, same top speed, and an awful lot of fun on the twisty back roads. However, the Alfa has gone up enormously in value, relatively. I paid just under £2,000 for that car because I was desperate for one. I wanted a really good one. Turns out mine wasn't. It was full of rust and we've fixed it a lot. But now it's a really good one. Now I've had it insured for £3,000 for the last year. Looking at the last couple to go for sale on Car and Classic and eBay, they're going for between £4,000 and £5,000 now, which means I've been undervaluing it again. Car values are just flying up and I'm not paying attention. I think a lot of plateauing and coming down again in some cases, but other things are still rising. So I'm going to call that a value of £4,000 on that particular car, which possibly, again, is undervaluing it because it's got the Momo leather interior. It's got lovely paint. It's just an amazing engine, a £7,000 engine rebuild, which I think may have been slightly hotted up a little bit. So I don't know. But call it £4,000, be conservative here, £4,000, and that is a beautiful Italian hot hatch, which would sell easily any day of the week. Now moving forward another year, 2002, Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor P71. Fairly rare car in the UK. A few more have come over in the last year or so. Since I've had it, I've seen a few more appear on the Facebook groups and the owners groups, as a lot more people are sort of becoming aware of them and realising how good they are and how hard it is to find a good one now, especially since Cletus McFarlane has destroyed so many of them. People are making an effort to recover them and bring them home, or to here anyway. But I think I have about £5,000 into that car. However, the last one to sell, which was a black and white, sold for £8,000, and then a silver one sold for a similar kind of price as well. So I think I've been again undervaluing the car. I think currently that's sitting there at about £8,000. So that's actually sort of an investment, you might call it. Hard as it is to believe. Now, one that actually is an investment, and one of the few times I've bought a car as an investment. I say few times, the only time I've bought a car as an investment. 2001 Mini R50 Cooper. This is the, I call it pre-production. I always get picked up on this by people saying, well, it's not technically pre-production because production began on such and such a date. The thing is, it's not a full production car. It's still got the changes that full production cars didn't get. It's got the early grills, it's got the early pedals, it's got the early headlining, all the stuff that didn't make it into production, and it's a Y-plate one, which meant it was built for BMW internal use. So I'm going to call it pre-production because it is a very early production car. It's 202 off the production line, which is one of the earliest Y-Ridge Minis or BMW Minis in existence. I paid £500 for this car. I've had it insured for about £2,000. However, looking at eBay, looking at again the Facebook groups, Car and Classic and so forth, the last couple of Y-Ridges to sell made £4,000 or more. And it's not an OBL. OBLs were the press cars, and they have a slight price premium on them over these cars, which haven't got the OBL number plates, which weren't press cars. But this car, I happen to know, was the dealer car from Scott All Mini in Leeds when they did the big reveal of what the new Mini is to invited guests only, and it was their demonstrator up in Leeds for the first couple of months of its life. So it does have known history. I've spoken to the dealership and they have confirmed it was their car, it's on their computer. Anyway, so yeah, this car has gone from 500 quid to £4,000, and I'm hanging on to it. I'm not selling this one because I'm sure this will continue to rise, being such an early special car. Rust-proofed, protected now, doesn't often come out in the rain, that kind of thing. Lovely little car now. So now, two 2003 cars to finish up our list of 14 vehicles, 15 if you include this one, which I said we're not. First of all, we've got the Freelander. Now, it's a TD4, which is the desirable BMW engine. It's an automatic, which I think is undesirable, but a lot of people do seem to like. And it's a Kalahari, which means it's fairly high spec. Again, quite hard to put a price on because you see rotters going for under 1,000 and you see minters going for 4 grand. This one though, I've had to repair the rust in it, which does knock it down a little bit. It has, however, got the fully working 4-wheel drive system, which fails on so many. So many Freelanders these days are 2-wheel drive only, simply because a very expensive part fails. The viscous coupling goes, no one's prepared to fix that because it costs a couple of thousand. The last owner did. So I've got a 4-wheel drive Freelander that works and is in reasonably nice condition. I'm going to be again conservative here and call it 1,750 quid for that Freelander. So none of these cars are big money, but there are a lot of them. And I think it will be a fairly easy sale as well in that particular case because they're quite desirable as early Freelanders, but I think it's another one that will continue to rise up in value a bit as time goes on because so many are being scrapped for little things. So I think it'll be quite a desirable car before too long. Now finally, the most recent addition to the fleet, and this is the Rover 75, the 1.8 turbo, which is like the really desirable one. People talk about the V6 because it's a V6, but this is the same performance, half the economy, or better, twice the economy I should say. It's in amazing condition. One owner, one private owner from new, apart from Rover who owned it initially, 59,000 miles, just fabulous condition. Now I gave £1,500 for it in the form of the Fiat Idea, which you swapped directly for it as a £1,500 swap. The Fiat and the Rover were both for sale for 1.5 grand, did a straight swap. Looking around at current prices, I'm going to say this is worth about 3,000, so it doubled its money instantly. I could even be greedy and put this up on Car and Classic or somewhere, Bidding Classics or something, for closer to 4. I was looking at the Facebook group for these cars a couple of nights ago. Someone had a very similar condition car in diesel. The group Hivemind reckoned the value on that was over 4,000, so maybe I'm, again, underselling it. I don't know, but that is a lovely car and potentially worth hanging on to in its condition because that is only going to keep on going up. So that's all 14 cars. This is the sum being greater than the individual parts because individually none of them are worth very much money apart from maybe the P6 V8 and the Crown Victoria. However, together this little lot is worth £47,800 and I'm down valuing a lot of them. Don't tell my wife because she'll want them all sold and want a new bathroom and kitchen. And potentially, as I'm underselling this, might make this actually worth about 50 grand. Now I realise in terms of YouTube celebrity fleets, this is very small fry because there's less than one of Hoovie's cars. Hoovie or Stradman or Matt Armstrong and his Lamborghinis and Ferraris and the rest of them. We're talking 200, 300, 400,000 pounds, maybe £1 million in some of these cases. But considering I'm talking 500 quid cars, that's quite a lot really. I'm actually quite surprised. That's what the collection is worth as a whole, and that's what Lancaster Insurance, who sponsor the channel, are insuring. Now the question is, and this is where the strong coffee is needed, because we've got to make a decision now. You and me, we need to have a think and a talk. Something's got to go. There's a couple other cars I would like to add to the channel, but there's no room and there's no money. So something has to go. Is it going to be the Rover 75? Because that's the newest one in the fleet. That's the one we intended to buy purely to flip on immediately. Sure, it's going to go up in value, but I'm going to have to keep on taxing it, which is 350 quid a year, I think. Going to keep on insuring it, keep servicing it. Whatever else fails on it is going to be paid for. So any potential gains in the car's value may be wiped out by the fact I've got to look after the thing. May even have to pay to store it as well. But it's a very nice car. It's beautiful to drive. It's lovely for a family day out, but it doesn't feel like a classic because it's so good. This is the problem with a 20-year-old car that is a very good car to start with. All these years later, it feels as comfortable as the Mercedes. In fact, more fun than the Mercedes because it's a manual. Tough choice. Secondly, but I can't swap it for the Mercedes as an everyday car because A, it's a saloon, the boot's not big enough, the dogs won't fit in the back. I'm not taking the dogs in there, interior's too nice. And it's low mileage. If I start bumping miles on at a crazy rate, that will completely devalue it. I've done 20,000 miles in this car since I've had it. I've not had it a year yet. Second choice, Volvo 740. I love the 1980s squareness of this thing. You just look at it and smile. I took photos of it in Sweden, I took photos of it on Drive It Day. Looking at those sort of solid angles just makes me grin. Looking at it right now, those boxy taillights, that puts a smile on my face. The trouble is driving it is very slow. It's very thirsty. And maybe there are some issues with it. Maybe the viscous fan, maybe the lambda sensor. I don't know what else could be wrong with it to make it get the kind of economy it gets, but it's frighteningly bad. And it's slow and it wallows. It's not as much fun as many of the other cars, but it's incredibly comfy. I mean, like for like, the Rover and the Volvo are very similar in some respects. They just cruise so nicely. I mean, the Volvo was wonderful going to Sweden in, but the Rover and the Crown Vic are the two other cars I would put as comparable for waftiness and niceness. So those two, chopping block really. Third option for chopping block would be the Rover 400 Tourer, because I've already got many other Rovers. But I do want to paint it, I do want to lower it, I'll do some projects with that car, so I don't really want to let that one go. Both of those two, there's very little left to do on them in terms of YouTube projects, and as much as I love to have the collection of cars, I have to think with a sort of business head on as well, what's good for the channel for you guys to keep on watching. Or the Rover 200 VI. Thing is, that's like the 75, it's enormous fun, but doesn't necessarily feel as special and exciting as the Alfa 145, which I know is a time bomb waiting to explode at any given opportunity and bankrupt me, but it feels like an event when you turn the key. Whereas the Rover just feels like you're going to get somewhere as intended. And I realise that's very much the point of a car, but a hobby car is a little bit different. So tough decisions. Cars that aren't an option to sell, Crown Vic Tourer not an option to sell, Mini not an option to sell, Alfa 145 not an option to sell at the moment. Rover Coupe needs too much fixing to sell. So anyway, I hope this has been vaguely interesting regarding what this collection of tat is actually worth. And secondly, what do you guys think? Really, realistically, it's got to come down to one of those two, I think, to part with. Let me know in the comments what you reckon. I may or may not take any notice. I probably won't. I'll probably just do something completely different. But at least let me know what you think. And don't say you'll unsubscribe if I sell one, because unfortunately I do have to sell something and it's going to upset someone, and that's going to include me, because I like all of them. Anyway, thank you for watching. Do like, do subscribe. Do head over to furiousdrum.co.uk, grab yourself a mug, a hat, sticker, fridge magnet, t-shirt, and the many other items. Oh, keyrings are good. And maybe I'll see you up at the Motorist in Yorkshire on Sunday morning, because that's our next meet. I've run out of things to say, so I'll see you soon. Take care and goodbye.